you know, great directors they have a particular specific vision, and they don't just direct traffic. They don't just bring people into scenes and out of scenes. They don't just tell them what they'd like to see. They have a vision. You know, they've got the movie in their head, and then there are directors who have a vision and they have the movie in their head, but it's just their vision. There's just nobody else that would do the movie that way, and I think, you know, in terms of appreciation, that's what I appreciate most about John as a director.
John Carpenter a dit de lui-même: « En France, on me considère comme un auteur, en Allemagne comme un cinéaste, au Royaume-Uni comme un réalisateur sans intérêt et aux États-Unis comme un nul. » Les nombreux films d'horreur qu'il a tournés au cours de sa carrière lui ont valu le surnom de « Prince des Ténèbres ». Pourtant, il a aussi réalisé pour la télévision un hommage à Elvis, et s'est rendu célèbre grâce à des films aussi divers que Starman, New York 1997, Les aventures de Jack Burton dans les griffes du mandarin, Les aventures d'un homme invisible, The Thing et Los Angeles 2013. Cinéphile averti et cinéaste amateur dès son enfance, il est devenu producteur, scénariste, musicien et bien sûr réalisateur. Alors qu'il étudie le cinéma à l'Université de Californie du Sud, il tourne en 1970 un court-métrage, The Resurrection of Bronco Billy, qui lui rapporte l'Oscar décerné aux étudiants. L'université s'approprie les droits du film. Carpenter est ulcéré. Pour son court-métrage suivant, Dark Star, réalisé avec un autre étudiant, Dan O'Bannon, il décide de financer lui-même la production, puis informe l'université que le film lui appartient. Ainsi commence la carrière très variée de John Carpenter.
When we finished Dark Star, the film department said, "That's our movie, we want it." And I said, "You prove it's your movie." I didn't sign anything that said that this is your movie. I paid for it. I own the negative. And I was right. It was an odd situation. We went through really a big training for the motion picture business. We got hooked up with a producer, distributor named Jack Harris, who basically gave us money to complete the film. And then it was sold to Bryanston Pictures. And it was actually released in theaters in Los Angeles, a big wide release, and I was amazed. It was just like a real movie. But I recall my horror at reading my first bad review in Variety. And it was totally unexpected. I thought, being sort of an innocent 20-something-year-old, that the movie would come out and they'd pull up in a limousine and say, "Mr. Carpenter, that we want you on the set." And that didn't happen. After Dark Star, I couldn't get a job, so I began writing screenplays, and I managed to sell a treatment and wrote a screenplay for John Peters called The Eyes of Laura Mars, which is based on an original idea of mine. And that gave me some financial freedom. And it also attracted the interest of an investor in Philadelphia who said, "Let me put up some money for a feature for you to write and direct." And that feature was Assault on Precinct 13. And basically, I thought, let me make an action exploitation film, but I'm going to base it on one of my favorite old films, Rio Bravo, which is an old Howard Hawks movie with John Wayne and Dean Martin. They're in the jail and the bad guys are outside. And I wanted to indicate that somehow to anybody who was interested without maybe saying it and laying it on the line in the movie. So the editor of the film was John T. Chance. John T. Chance is the name, is John Wayne's name, the sheriff in Rio Bravo, Sheriff Chance. So it was my kind of tip of the hat to Howard Hawks. And again, when the bad reviews came at the time, they were just devastatingly bad reviews. They called me all sorts of names. Like, what's going on here? Why is this? Why don't people appreciate my work? And it was only until I took the movie over to England, and Assault played at the British Film Institute, And all of a sudden, they said, this is a great film. And I got this reputation over there as being some kind of a new young director in England. And that reputation kind of preceded me back to the United States, and that's how my career kind of got started. I was thinking a few years ago about which of my films I enjoy the most. I thought about Assault on Precinct 13 and the kind of spirit that went into making it, how little money we had. We had $100,000 to make it, and actually came out with a real movie. And I wondered if it was going to be everything I thought it would be, or as good as I thought it would be. And I realized I can't judge anymore because I've seen it so much, and it's on my own work. It's like I'm totally unobjective. All I can do is make it and send it out there. It's like a kid. You have all these children, and you raise them the best you can. But now it's 18, now it's time for you to get a job. Go, and good luck. And some of them make it, some of them don't. Some of them become drug addicts, and some of them become millionnaires. And what are you going to do?
Au début de sa carrière, Carpenter met en scène un téléfilm intitulé « Someone's Watching Me ». Sur le tournage, il rencontre l'actrice Adrienne Barbeau, qui devient sa femme. Séparés depuis, le couple a collaboré plusieurs fois, notamment pour deux grands succès, Fog et New York 1997.
My first wife, Adrienne Barbeau, was a co-star in Someone's Watching Me. We met on that movie and basically kind of fell in love. And it was the beginning of our marriage. In that film, she played a lesbian, as a matter of fact, kind of unusually. But we had a good time.
I got a call from my agent who said there is a feature director who's doing a television film for Warner's, I believe it was. Wants to meet you. He thinks you'd be right for this role. And so I went in and met this gentleman. And I was very impressed because he was a feature director. I found out later that he was rather nervous because it was his first, I believe it was his first union film. And he was working under television restrictions and constrictions and things like that. And at the time, I remember thinking, the character of Sophie was gay. I mean, very little was made of it in the film, but there were a few lines. And so he said to me, well, how would you say this? And we were talking about it, and he said, well, you know, I would say to my friends, I would say it like this. And I thought, oh, is he gay? Is that what he's telling me? Because I thought he was a very attractive man, you know. And of course, as it turned out, that was not the case. And, but it was an interesting first meeting.
Halloween was a very quickly put together idea. Irwin Yablans had released Assault on Precinct 13, and he got a money source, Mustafa Akkad, who was putting up $300,000 for low-budget films. And Irwin came to me and said, would you like to make a horror film for $300,000?
We shot in 21 days, 20 days actually. It was the perfect experience. There was one Winnebago for everything. Wardrobe, makeup, props.
And I have an idea. It's about these babysitters who get stalked by a killer. We'll call it the Babysitter Murders. I wrote the screenplay with Deborah Hill. And at one point during the writing of it, Irwin called me up and said, why don't we set it on Halloween night? And as a matter of fact, why don't we call it Halloween? And it was really that kind of idea that drove the film into what it was.
John very specifically said, I want you to be vulnerable. I said, well, I don't want to be weak. I don't want to be weak. I want to be strong. And he said, no, vulnerability means that he said, I want you to be so vulnerable that the audience will literally speak to you in the screening, in the movie when people are seeing it. I want people to talk to you. And I went and saw it in Hollywood very early on in its release, about a week into the release. And sure enough, right at the sequence where Laurie leaves her house and goes across to see what's happening across the street, this woman stood up in this thing and went, don't go in there! And it was great, but it worked. It totally worked.
Well, there's many legendary things that go along with movies. You know, when famous movies are made, you sometimes don't realize how simply you can do things. One of the things that we came across in Halloween was what kind of a mask was our killer going to wear? The most obvious thing would be some kind of bizarre clown mask, but that didn't seem appropriate. It was written in the screenplay as a mask that made it look like the pale features of a human being. So the production designer, Tommy Lee Wallace, went out to Burt Wheeler's magic shop and picked up a full-headed mask of William Shatner from Star Trek, and it was a Captain Kirk mask. And what he did was he cut the eye holes a little bit bigger, he spray painted the whole thing white, and put it on, and it was terrifying. So I guess I owe it all to Shatner. And the thing about that movie was that was the most fun to make of any of the films. First of all, rule of movie making, anytime you're making a horror film, you'll have more fun than any other movie. Making horror movies is extremely fun, and I can't explain why to you. And the gorier and the more bloody they are, the more fun they are. Everybody on the set has a blast. And Halloween was absolutely fun. It was like, it was almost like a picnic.
John Carpenter single-handedly gave me a movie career. I mean, it's just no question that you know, you never know what would have happened had you not been given an opportunity by someone. I'll never forget, as long as I live, the experience of getting that call that I got that job and looking at this script and seeing my character's name on every page. It was very exciting for me.
En 1979, le producteur Dick Clark cherche un réalisateur pour une dramatique télévisée de 3 heures, une biographie romancée d'Elvis Presley. Il propose le film à John Carpenter, qui choisit Kurt Russell pour le rôle titre.
No doubt Elvis Presley is the most influential individual singer of his time. He revolutionized the entire music industry.
Maybe they're right, Ray. Maybe it's all over.
In today's market. Will the public
Hillbilly Cat was just a flash in the pan, you know, a novelty just wore off.
lost his throne forever. Even
You
the
wait.
Beatles are showing signs of slipping.
You gonna knock him dead?
Rock lives forever. And his surprising decision to do a comeback show at the International seems to be do or die for Elvis. Can he survive the most critical crowd in show business, Las Vegas? It just could be the beginning or the end for a brilliant.
When I came aboard Elvis, the TV show, there were two choices of actors to play Elvis. One was a guy who looked exactly like Elvis Presley. He was stunning. Could act about as good as this typewriter. Nothing. Zero. Nothing. Poor guy couldn't say cat. But man, he looked like Elvis. And then I saw some tape on this other guy who, forgive me, Kurt, I didn't know who Kurt Russell was. I had never watched Disney movies. I never watched television. Here's this guy with kind of these cab door ears, these giant ears, no hair, and boy, he was Elvis. He captured Elvis. That's what it's got to be, that guy, right? And so Kurt came in the office one day, and this is the guy who's playing Elvis? And I look at him. I don't know how to shoot him as Elvis. He doesn't look like Elvis. And so I said, well, if you think you can play this role, I guess I can direct it.
I kind of thought, well, this is a way to go out in a blaze of glory, you know, with a horrible, just a laughable performance. Or I felt confident, actually, that it was a great character to play. I thought that it was an interesting, the script was a good script. It was a good rags to riches story. And then I began to realize that Elvis really learned to play Elvis. And that kind of gave me a clue as to, you know, how I could maybe approach this role, that maybe I could learn to play Elvis too.
We had 30 days to shoot a 3-hour television movie with 88 speaking parts, 150 different locations, and a period movie that took place from the 1950s through the 1960s.
You wish they wouldn't do that.
And all I can tell you is I have never worked so hard in my entire life. I didn't know it was going to be that hard. I didn't know it was going to be that grim. I didn't know how tough a director's job was. And that was my boot camp.
It was a great luck for me to get John, because he was, I could only describe it as a perfect director for that actor and that job.
It turns out he was just absolutely stunning in it. And it's because Kurt Russell is a born, natural mimic. He's just a natural-born actor.
« 1980 est l'année de la sortie de Fog, dont les vedettes sont Adrienne Barbeau, Jamie Lee Curtis, Janet Leigh et Al Holbrook. Nouveau succès critique et commercial, ce film consolide la réputation du maître de l'épouvante, John Carpenter.
As I think back later, I think The Fog was really influenced by an old movie I saw when I was a kid called The Crawling Eye. The Crawling Eye, these monsters lived up on this mountain, and they lived in fog, and the fog would move down, and the monsters would be inside it, and it would move back. And I think that's probably where it came from, but I don't remember it at the time.
Well, I had the advantage in The Fog of having had the role written for me because I knew the director. He, at that time, talked about how he had maybe a prototype of a female heroine in his mind that he liked to write. And I seemed to have the qualities that could portray that. And so Stevie Wayne was not far from me.
Andy! Andy, get out of the house! Mrs. Corbett, get him out of the house! Please, run!
I think maybe we better close all the windows, Andy. Are your bedroom windows closed?
I'll go see.
John has an ability that reminds me of Hitchcock in that of the building of suspense. And to John's credit, he did not overshow what he could show, because I think once you show too much, then the suspense is gone.
As easy and fun as Halloween was, as horrible and gut-wrenching was The Fog, because it's a totally different kind of film. All horror films are not the same. And a ghost story is very difficult because to make the audience believe in ghosts and to believe they're really there is a more difficult task than making them believe a guy could take a knife and come after you. That's very primal.
En 1981, Carpenter tourne New York 1997, qui deviendra un film culte bien après sa sortie. On y retrouve Kurt Russell, Lee Van Cleef, Ernest Borgnine, Donald Pleasence, Isaac Hayes, Harry Dean Stanton et Adrienne Barbeau.
I got the idea in film school from a novel written by Harry Harrison called Planet of the Damned. And in this story, some guy is given a mission to go to this planet. It's the most dangerous, evil place in the universe, and he has to solve some problem on the planet. You know, it's not the hero who says, yes, sir, I'm going to go. It's the hero who says, oh, my God, I have to go, or I won't survive. The first thing about Escape from New York was we decided immediately we couldn't shoot it in New York because there's no way to get the kind of look. They wouldn't let us shut it down, and we were thinking about using back lots. We had no idea how to stage this movie until someone scouted St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis had had this tremendous fire in the 70s that had burned out the entire downtown section of the city. I mean, it was gutted, blackened. So we went there, and the city was in such trouble at the time. They said, whatever you guys want, we will shut down power for blocks and blocks. And the only way we got to make that movie was by going there. That's the only way.
Personally, as an actor, it's fun to play that role, but I get more pleasure out of playing it almost for John. John being on the set, you know, I know is having a good time watching what he's dreamt up for this character to do. And then I think he has a good time sharing that character with me. We both sort of get to do Snake, you know.
I remember us talking on the phone, and I hadn't worked with him, so I immediately said, well, you know, I like to change lines around and say it the way I say it. And he said, that's fine with me as long as you don't mess with my plot. And most directors I've worked for let me do whatever I want to do. And most good directors do that. I've worked with Alfred Hitchcock, John Huston, Martin Scorsese, Francis Coppola. And John, I put him, he's right in there with all of those guys as far as I'm concerned.
The only anecdote that I remember about Escape that most people may not be aware of was that after John put the film together and screened it, there was some confusion about whether or not Maggie had actually been killed. So we came back and shot the death scene, Maggie's dead scene. She wasn't dying, she was already dead, in our garage. You know, just put the costume on, laid me down in the cement, and put some blood there, and took a close-up so everyone would know that Maggie actually had bought the farm.
Le 7e film de Carpenter sort en 1982. Il s'agit du remake d'un classique de 1951, La chose d'un autre monde, co-réalisé par Howard Hawks et Christian Nyby. Malgré des effets spéciaux réussis et une star de l'envergure de Kurt Russell, le film est fraîchement reçu par la critique et le public.
When you come to the thing, you come to one of my favorite films of my own, but one of the most painful experiences I went through as a professional, probably changed my professional life. Well, let me back up a minute. 2 weeks before the movie comes out, there's this other film that comes out. It's called E.T. And there's this burst all around this movie of love. And 2 weeks later, out comes my movie. And my movie is just exactly the opposite of E.T. It is not an upcry. It is a downer. It is the grimmest thing you've ever seen. I was criticized heavily for the gore. They said this guy is a pornographer of violence. I've been called a lot of names before, and I got called the most names on that film. Here I thought I'd made this really great movie, right?
It was a very scary story, and I think that John, you know, really boldly shot it the way it should have been shot, with what I consider to be the greatest monster of all time. And one of the reasons that I was pleased to be in the movie and to do the movie, aside from working with John again, and again having an opportunity to play a character that I don't think anybody else would have given me the opportunity to play, was to do a movie with what could be the, at least up to that time, the greatest monster in a horror film of all time. And I don't know if that monster's ever been surpassed. Honestly, it was extremely well done. Stay back. I think the final result, for my money, is that of all the movies I've done, I think it's, if it's not the best made movie I've ever worked in, it's one of the best made movies. I do think that that's a classic film. I do think that it's a great story. And I think that what happened was that about 10 years later, as John and I had talked about and suspected, audiences were then able to relax and get past the monster, be able to appreciate the monster, and therefore appreciate the story, that the monster is just doing what we were doing. It's just trying to survive.
I had made a deal during the thing to make another film at Universal called Firestarter, which was a Stephen King novel. Universal was so upset and shocked by the reviews and the fact that the movie had not made the kind of money that they thought, that I lost the job. And it didn't work for about 8 or 9 months. Didn't have anything. I thought my career was going to end, and all of a sudden, from heaven drops this book, this Stephen King book called Christine. And I needed a job, so I did it.
Starman, en 1984, est certainement l'une des plus prestigieuses réalisations de John Carpenter. Avec très peu de scènes de violence, de poursuites en voiture et d'explosions, il rencontre un franc succès. Jeff Bridges et Karen Allen séduisent le public, et le film donne naissance à un vrai phénomène. Les fan clubs, les publications et le merchandising atteignent une ampleur insoupçonnée. Il y aura même brièvement une série télévisée adaptée du film avec Robert Hayes.
Right before Starman came to me, I had released Christine had been out, and I realized if I don't do something different somewhere here, I'm always going to be in this ghetto, and it won't be my choice. If I choose to be a scary director, fine, but if no one ever knows that I can do anything else, I won't be able to have any breadth to my work. And when Starman came, it was an immediate jump. People have pointed out that, well, it's still, you know, science fiction, and that's true, it is. It's still within the same genre that I've made movies in. Most of them are. Most of them are in sci-fi and horror. But within that context, it was a you know, nice little love story, and I wanted to show I could do it. It's a really funny thing about acting and actors and crews. When we started shooting the film, of course, you shoot it out of continuity, and the crew was watching Jeff perform the role of Starman, and they saying, "What is this idiot doing? This is not very good." And there was a lot of criticism of it. They thought he was way off base. It's only until you see it all together you realize his genius, that he had figured out this character from beginning to end. You see, movies is about the image. It's about the image and the emotion coming together. And there were a couple of scenes that Jeff had where they were truly magical scenes. Something happened in the performance, in the moment, that, as they say, where we pulled it off. Jeff is a brilliant actor. He's a brilliant actor. He had figured out every stage of Starman and every stage of the Alien. And I'm very proud of my work and his work. It earned him an Academy nomination. And a lot of people love the movie. It's because it's written so very well.
I must go.
À nouveau, John Carpenter met en scène son vieil ami, Kurt Russell, en 1986 pour Les aventures de Jack Burton dans les griffes du mandarin. Carpenter aime à dire que le héros inapte du film est une mauvaise imitation de John Wayne.
It, like the other movies that I've worked on with John, it has garnered this large cult type of an audience, and they don't just like the movie, they love the movie. They know everything about the movie. They get every little nuance of the movie. They understand the characters completely. More so than many other movies I've done that were big, either big movies or big successful movies.
Basically, Kurt did if you watch the movie again, he does a John Wayne imitation. He's doing John Wayne in that movie, only he's an idiot John Wayne, a John Wayne who's incompetent, who just talks too much, and he's swaggering around, and then he can't find his ass with two hands.
Again, not a successful picture financially when it opened. That one ran into political problems at 20th Century Fox. It ran into real political problems, which was unfortunate because the movie scored through the roof when it was being tested.
Basically, here's the kind of person that I am. If you ask me to do something, I'll do anything for you. I'll change the ending of my film. I'll change the beginning of my film. I'll rewrite my film. I'll recut my film if you ask me. If you tell me to do something, you're never going to get any place. Do not tell me to do something. Don't force me to do it. And that's the problem that we had. And I prefer to be treated like a professional, and I prefer to be treated with a little bit of dignity as a human being, and that didn't happen. So that was another turning point in my career. Interesting, I've had several. And that one I said adios to the studio's system for a while. I don't want to deal with you guys anymore. Goodbye.
I mean, there couldn't have been more things stacked up against a movie, opening. And it faded quickly from sight. But when it came out on video, I remember, and I can still go to a video store now, and they'll say, "You know what I can't keep in here?" And I say, "Well," they say, "Big Trouble in Little China, you cannot keep a copy in here." It says, always comes in, goes out. And of all the movies I've done with John, that one, I think, performed the most abysmally in the beginning, but went on to, again, garner a very, very significant and large audience that appreciates that movie for what it is. There's some fantastic action in it, just pure activity in that movie that's in terms of filming it, is pretty tough to beat.
Carpenter accepte ensuite de réaliser 2 films d'horreur à petit budget pour honorer un contrat avec les studios Universal. Le premier, Prince des Ténèbres, sort en 1987. Puis vient Invasion Los Angeles en 1988.
This two-picture deal with Universal, the Prince of Darkness came first. Then it was a straight-out horror movie in a church. And I wanted to work with Donald Pleasance again. I wanted to work with some of the Asian actors that I had worked with from Big Trouble in Little China. And I wanted to make a real scary movie. And it truly was terrifying. I saw it with a preview audience, and they were screaming and yelling and going crazy. It was not well received by the critics again, and they were angry that I went back to horror. See, once redeemed, there's a redemption, condemned redemption thing in American society. We want to destroy all our heroes. We want to build them up and destroy them, and then when they come back and redeem themselves, then we accept them, okay? But if a hero is built up and is destroyed and then comes back and then leaves again and does something bad, we can't figure it out. So nobody could figure out why I wanted to go back and make this balls-out horror film. And it was because I was so sick of the studio system.
Les aventures d'un homme invisible en 1992 met en vedette Chevy Chase, Daryl Hannah, Sam Neill et Michael McKean. C'est le remake de L'Homme Invisible, tourné en 1933 avec Claude Rains.
We had this great set on Clue, you know, we were shooting Clue. And we'd have people come drifting in to take a look at it, people who were working on the lot. And one of them had been Carpenter, and we talked a little bit about his version of The Thing, which I thought was, you know, great, eye-popping, you know, scary masterpiece.
Basically, Memoirs came to me as a screenplay from Warner Brothers that Chevy Chase was involved with, and I'd always been a fan of his. I always wanted to work with him because I thought he was very funny. He was a producer on the film, and it was a modern retelling of the old Invisible Man story.
I knew that voice. Who the hell did he think he was kidding? These guys were fast.
For Invisible Man, I went up to ILM and worked with Bruce Nicholson, who I've worked with many times before on special effects. And he and the team up at ILM came up with a way to shoot the invisibility that was later used in Forrest Gump to indicate the guy had no legs. We developed that first. Some of it was done with that technique, which is very, very interesting. And the other way is the old-fashioned way, which is a whole lot of wires and turning knobs and moving chairs. But as I look back on it, I'm very happy with the film. I think it worked out particularly well.
I'm not insane. You hear me? I'm not insane!
Carpenter porte à l'écran en 1995 L'Antre de la Folie, adapté de plusieurs nouvelles de H.P. Lovecraft. Sam Neill, Jürgen Prochnow, Julie Carmen et Charlton Heston sont à l'affiche.
A couple of years before I started the movie In the Mouth of Madness, I got a screenplay from New Line. And the screenplay was written by Michael DeLuca, called In the Mouth of Madness. He had written it when he was working in New York, and it's basically a kind of tribute to H.P. Lovecraft and the Lovecraftian mythos of these old creatures on the other side waiting to take control. But it's done with a kind of new twist, and it had a very interesting hero in it. And they sent it back to me once again and said, wouldn't you like to do this? And this was around 1993, after I'd done Invisible Man, and it wasn't successful, and I was looking for a job, and so I said yes. And luckily for me, I had worked with one of my favorite actors on Invisible Man was Sam Neill, and he agreed to play the lead in The Mouth of Madness. And Sam is, again, one of these actors that I've had the good luck to work with, who is a consummate professional and just an absolutely brilliant actor. I can count on my hand the ones that I can depend on, like Jeff Bridges and Kurt Russell, and Sam Neill is in that category. And the movie was it had comedic elements, and it was another fantasy like The Fog. It was a movie that you know the stuff that's going on cannot possibly exist. But we went up to Canada and shot it in Toronto, and believe it or not, for the first time in years I got rave mainstream reviews. It was a big shock to me. And when I see in mainstream reviews, I'm talking about New York Times and Los Angeles Times. I mean, when you get these big newspapers who are saying, boy, is he good, it's kind of a big shock. And the movie opened like number 3, and it didn't do particularly well because it was more of an intellectual horror film. I don't know that it was as visceral as the audience wanted, but I'm extremely proud of it. It was made for a very low budget, $10 million, and that included, you know, everything in there.
Forget it, Robbie. I'm my own man. Nobody pulls my strings.
Mouth of Madness had a real frenetic cutting pace. There was a lot of dream sequences in it. There was a lot of kind of things that occurred in the mind. And that was a movie created in the editing room. And it had a lot of energy to it. After In the Mouth of Madness, I did Village of the Damned. And this was to end a commitment to Universal that I had had. And they wanted to make the film, and I got a great cast together, but the story is very serious. I mean, it asks the question, what happens when you find out that your children are killers, murderers, and evil? And we took it seriously, and as opposed to a kind of rollicking horror film where there's a lot of jokes and humor and lines tossed aside, I went back to the source material, which is a book from the 50s called The Midwich Cuckoos by John Wyndham. He's a British writer. And I found a little actress who could actually play the lines, who could actually say the alien lines back to Christopher Reeve, who was the star of the film. And this was another species. These people had given birth to a species that was going to take over the Earth. And it was a very somber film. And it was Chris Reeve's last movie before his accident. You know, I'm often surprised by descriptions of the cinema of unease and my relationship to it, that people say that I can make you feel uncomfortable in a film through the cinema techniques. Yes, within the context of a theatrical motion picture. I'm in the Hollywood game, unfortunately, and there are certain limits to what you can do. If you go beyond the limits, as I have discovered in my career, they won't let you work. You have to stay within a certain area and work it. If the country was a little bit different, if we were embracing kind of open, free speech and anything goes, I could really scare you. But the country won't allow it. We're too scared in our personal lives these days.
En 1996, John Carpenter et Kurt Russell font de nouveau équipe pour un film produit par Paramount. Los Angeles 2013, la suite de leur grand succès de 1981, New York 1997.
Escape from L.A. began after Kurt and I had finished Big Trouble in Little China. We were returning from New York and said, wouldn't it be great to go back and meet that character again? Because Kurt, that's his favorite character. And I thought it would be fun to do to L.A. what we had done to New York, which was basically send it up and make it an evil place. But we had no story. And there was actually a screenplay written by a screenwriter. It didn't work out very well. And Kurt and I sat in a coffee shop, and he said, there's nothing frightening about L.A. I mean, it's the beach, it's sunny, it's daytime, everybody's... What's the big deal?
It wasn't really until things came together, they coincided. The earthquake hit Los Angeles, and Los Angeles was becoming, defined as a city of violence, and a city that was ripe, basically, for an escape type of an episode.
And all of a sudden, it became viable to do a sequel because there was a story. And so Kurt got Deborah and I together, and we came up with this story, and Paramount Pictures said, let's go, let's make a sequel.
We had 70 nights in a row, and the first night we went out there and I got in the outfit, and as soon as you put the eye patch on, you sort of begin to say, oh, wait a minute, I remember this. But what was terrific about that was that John and I had not worked together. We hadn't worked together in 10 or 11 years. And it was interesting, because we've both done a lot of different movies in between, and who knows, maybe things fall apart and you just suddenly you don't see things the same way, and it's kind of like not the experience you'd hoped for and looked for. And he says, action. And I heard those words, and as soon as he said, cut, it was literally like we had finished Escape from New York on Friday. We'd taken the weekend off, and we were shooting on Monday. And I looked over at John, and I could just see this look on his face, and I could just see, he said, yeah, we're back here now. We were just in the groove. We were doing we were going to do the movie we wanted to make. It was a great feeling, a return to glory of friendship.
So it was an emotional and physical challenge. But once again, I had Kurt Russell. And once you've got Kurt, you know, he was a great collaborator. We wrote the screenplay together. We developed the character together. We dealt with the problems together. He was a great friend and ally. You know, I love him very much. He was a blast to work with. I've never had as much fun on a film. And we're both really pleased with the result.
You know, I don't know about his personal life or what it was that drew him to such dark stuff. See, what I love is that people forget that he directed Elvis, the TV movie with Kurt Russell as Elvis, and it was fantastic.
Although it's not really thought of as a comedy, I think that Starman has a sweetness about it, and I thought Jeff Bridges does a very funny performance, you know. It's that very kind of like, it's like Mork in a drama, you know, and I think that was, you know, that's very much his sensibility, Carpenter's sensibility.
Well, I think he's just a good director. That's first. He really understands it, and it's probably cellular. I mean, I think he started thinking film at such a young age, probably around 8 years old, and it's really his life.
I don't know, labeling me is tough. I would say that I'm John Carpenter, and I do things that other people don't do, and other people do things I can't do. I know filmmaking, it's a part of my blood. I may not be the best at it, but when it's all said and done, these are my films from top to bottom. With very few exceptions, every frame is what I want it to be. And that's about as close as you can get to having a pure creative expression in a collaborative medium. I mean, let's face it, film is collaborative, but everybody collaborates with the director, okay? The more control you can seize of every aspect of it, the more it's going to be a personal film. So this leads us back to my training at USC when I was a 20-year-old kid arriving from the airplane from Bowling Green, Kentucky. They said, look, doesn't matter who writes it, doesn't matter who's in it, make it your movie. Make it a personal film. Make it John Carpenter's movie. So that's what I've done for 26, 27 years.